Well, I genuinely appreciate you making time for this.
Yeah, no, I was excited.
It's so funny. I know just before we hit record or whatever, like, I think I came across you. It was not more than 2 or 3 weeks ago, and you did some interview. I think I told you it was funny as what kind of superhero
Oh
you
yeah,
want to be or something.
the Proust questionnaires. Yes,
And
yeah.
it made me stop scrolling, and I watched the whole thing, and I'm like, I don't even know who this guy is or who this company is. And then, so I sent it to a couple people, and I think I reached out and grabbed a coffee,
Yeah.
and then it turned out you talked to my brother Kenny, and you talked to Rochelle, and I'm like, why is it so funny that we're just meeting each other
It's
first
just
time?
crazy, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Anyway,
because you've been away, that's why.
I've been away.
But you're here now.
So I know a lot of people know who you are. I know that, and I'm looking forward to getting to know you myself because I actually don't really know who you are.
We just had our coffee.
If you could just give us a high level who you are, what's your background, just so if no one who's ever met about you before, what does that look like?
Yeah, do you want me to? Are we live right now? You want me to start or no?
We're going.
Oh yeah, perfect. Yeah, awesome. Now it's yeah. I mean, I'm a Calgary guy. My folks moved here in the late '70s. My dad has an inspection service company, right, which I now run. So we came down here, and I'm the oldest of three boys. And I grew up in Oak Ridge Estates on the south side of the reservoir. My folks built a new house there, and grew up here in town playing hockey as a kid, playing lacrosse as a kid. Went to university here, got a political science degree, which I've spoken about before, where it fit in really nice to my hockey schedule at school. So, you know, there's lots of times in my life where I kind of think about that education, and probably where I should have ended up was engineering. I was kind of a science and math kid and pretty nerdy academic kind of guy, and for whatever reason landed in the political science world. And I used to kind of regret it a lot for a long time. And then I kind of started to see the benefit of it. So aside from, you know, going through it and like completing something, you made me, I think I said to you, it makes me interesting at parties because I know a little bit about politics, enough to be dangerous anyway. But I also liked that a lot of it, the way it was structured was, you know, form an argument, be able to defend it. And I think that's a really valuable skill. So it was like critical thinking skills. And I always like to, you know, I don't want to ruffle any feathers right off the bat, but I like to say when I went to, thank God I went to university when they taught you how to think instead of what to think. So,
Sadly,
yeah,
that is the case.
It is very much so right now.
And I don't want to bring up any provinces in particular, but one of our sons is going out of province for university because that's where he want to go. And I was talking to even Sweet Marie. I was like, I just so want to be in Alberta because I'm not from here, but it's my home and I love it. And everyone thinks like me. And I was like, I hope he doesn't come back thinking differently. And that's a ridiculous thing to say, I know, but that's what I feel.
It's not entirely, right? So there's definitely there's a theme of that through some of the education. And, you know, if you follow people like Jordan Peterson, and I don't know if you know him at all, but he talks a lot about how universities have changed their angle a little bit. So yeah.
It made him basically a celebrity.
Yeah, 100%.
The one thing I did want to ask you about, because it's the reason that we started to support pipelines, it was basically to add some positivity to an industry that has become super polarized. And I don't know when it happened.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, and I can't really comment on that. But I'm seeing it on LinkedIn a lot, and I noticed your posts, like you're so very... I find you very politically correct.
Try to be.
You're critical in the most gentle way, but I can see you're some critical thinking that goes when you comment on some of these political posts, and I appreciate you not being too screw Trudeau and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think you get taken more seriously when you frame the argument a little better, a little more intelligently. So I try to, not get into, F Trudeau and things like that. So I try and think about it, and I speak about, whether it's the party or the perspective of that. So that's how I try and frame things. And I could easily, for a long time, I kind of just stayed back from that. I'm like, oh, this is a business forum, and I don't really want to rattle any cages or anything like that. But then at the same time, it's, a lot of people, social media itself will often feed you more of what you're listening to anyway, right? So that there's algorithms and such, so that if you're a kind of a conservative supporter, you're going to see a lot of conservative stuff. So one thing I consciously do, it's something my wife and I talk about a lot, and we talk with our kids about it too, is listening to both sides of the fence.
Love it.
Because that's how you can form a better argument, right? So if you don't know what the other side's saying, you're just kind of talking.
Love it.
So I follow the Liberal Party. I don't follow them, but I observe them, and things like that. I try to keep my eyes open to both sides, and everything is. There's two sides to it, and you need to see two sides to it. And the world, like you said, has become polarized, because for the longest time, like conservative was just left of, or just right of center, and liberal was just left of center. And now it's like way spread out. And conservative hasn't moved far right. Anybody who says that, it's just plain old delusional. But I think you can form the argument that the those who just left of center have moved pretty far left.
Oh, for sure.
I think so. That's sort of the perspective I try and take in forming my arguments and comments.
I do appreciate it. I mean, I'm going back probably a good year now where I actually unfollowed all the politics because I am very interested in it.
Yeah.
And I followed very closely, and I found it so negative, and I found myself pissed off all the time. I'm like,
It is.
I'm pretty sure this isn't healthy.
Yes.
So I unfollowed everything, just take time out, and bit by bit, I'll be honest with you, like I'm back on.
Yeah, I mean, it affects your life. I mean, it's hard to not follow it. But you're right; it can be all consuming, and it is negative. It can drag you down, right? So I mean, I've made that comment lately because, of course, election time is getting closer and things like that. So I've tried to sort of trim back a little bit what I observe. I do have on my phone my LinkedIn app. It doesn't have notifications turned on, so it's not dinging every 5 minutes for me. I do check it pretty consistently, but I don't use any other social media, so it's the only one I'm using. But yeah, you have to see the positive side, and it's kind of I have kids that are 19, 22, and 26, and I try to talk to them about, you have to control the things that are within your control, and you also need to be involved, right? Like, you can't sit around and complain about how the country or the government or things are being run if you don't participate. So you have to participate, and participating means starting with being educated about it, and following a certain extent of it.
Well, I appreciate you being open to listening to both sides, and whether it educates your own argument or help you learn something new.
Absolutely.
Some of the best conversations I've had with some friends, and these are like very, very dear friends of mine, and don't think politically the same way at all. And although that just floors me, and Marie gets probably my more honest thoughts in the background.
Sure. No filter thoughts.
No filter thoughts. The conversations with her, because I'm a gentle guy, and she's a gentle person, they're way more interesting. Because I realized, I was like, okay, so you came out of the box that way, maybe I did as well. So I'm not just grew up here. So, no, I actually came up differently, and we're just different people. So there's no amount of argument or anything I can offer I've since learned.
Well, and I think you need to, if you remove the emotion from it, it's logic and applying that. So if you try to remove the emotion from, that's what happens. People get angry. It's the F Trudeau, and it's the argument, the angriness of it all, right? So if you can remove that emotion a little bit, then it becomes a more interesting argument. And you can find out too who you might want to have a discussion with. It doesn't have to be an argument, discussion. By who's emotional, like who can't contain their emotion. So I mean, luckily that's a little bit, back to sort of my upbringing, my background. So my dad was a pretty calm and quiet guy, and everyone's like, kind of when he spoke, people listened. Because he'd say what he was thinking, and he meant what he said, and everything was kind of genuine and sincere, and that's kind of how we run our company. And then even through other parts of my life, so I was a hockey goalie, I still am, stop pucks for fun, and that was part of playing goal too, was being calm all the time. I learned at a pretty young age you can't get rattled. I mean, you're either the hero or the zero, right? So you can't get upset when that puck goes behind you. You can't carry that with you for the rest of the game. So I learned kind of early on how to control my emotions that way. Because I'm not the best athlete by any stretch, but I understood the mental side of the game, and that's the hardest part of that position. And then later on, when I took a little break from highly competitive hockey, and I got into I may have told you before, I was a Muay Thai kickboxer for a low-level sort of flailing, you and me trade bombs in the middle kind of fighter. But I did that for a little period of time. And some of the coaching that I got from my coach was legendary Mike Miles here in Calgary, and then one of his students, Trevor Smandich, was, you don't ever show your emotion. So if you come and watch some of these fights, of course, it was Muay Thai, so the classic are the Thai fighters. So a little Thai fighter would come here to Calgary, and he'd fight another guy from Calgary, and the Calgary guy is kicking, like he's throwing everything he's got at him. Hit him with a kitchen sink, and the Thai guy just smiles at you. Right, so you know how unnerving that is for somebody, right? So that was kind of, I take that approach, and a lot of times it's like, keep my emotion out of it. Don't be like Dr. Spock or completely cold when it comes to certain things. But because of my science and math sort of brain, it's a little easier for me to, I do have empathy and those kind of things, but a little less so maybe than other people.
So that's probably an interesting skill set you took from sports that you probably didn't realize you were taking at the time.
Not at the time, 100%, yeah. And it's something like, so I mean, I'm heavily involved in sports. It runs through my life. I still play those games. It's what keeps me from being crazy. It's my outlet, because when I'm playing hockey, I can't think about a bad day in the oil patch or, you've the price of oil or you've lost a contract, those kind of things. I have to be engaged, because the days that I'm not engaged, that puck goes behind me an awful lot. And those days happen, make no mistake about it. And then the same thing on the coaching side. I coach female athletes, coaching lacrosse, box lacrosse. So I have 2 daughters who play, and I played for a long time, and it's something that really I enjoy a lot. But since I learned those lessons through sport, and I didn't really realize them until later on in my life, I'm very deliberate about letting the athletes I coach know that they are learning life lessons through sport. So I try to be very specific about how this life lesson or what happened in sport is going to apply to your life later on. Right now I'm coaching girls kind of like 17 to 22. So they're right in that span of life where they're finishing school, they're going to school, they're looking for jobs. They're starting the serious, big girl part of life, right? So I talk to them about that, and I'm like, hey, these are the skills you're going to learn down the road, or this is how you apply them, and that seems to get a lot of attention. And I always say like coaching female athletes is quite different than coaching male athletes, but female athletes, they really need to know why. Why am I doing that? The male guy, I can say, hey, run through the boards head first 100 times because the coach said so, and they'll do it. Some will do it, and they'll whatever. But the girls want to know why. You get more out of them. Not that boys don't want to, but it's if they know why, you get a better response from them.
Do you teach your girls or coach your girls?
Yeah, I've coached my 2 girls. So my poor daughters have only a coach they've ever had. So yeah, the 22-year-olds. So they started at 4 and 6, played all the way up. They're both still playing, which is great because in sport, not just females but male athletes, you lose a ton of them kind of between that 14 and 17 age when other things become interesting, whether it's jobs or boys or girls or whatever. That starts taking up time, school. So it's really hard to keep players playing through that age group. So I'm really proud of the fact that my daughters still play, and they're into coaching as well. Like I always said, I had no plans. Like I didn't think about it at the time, but giving back to the sport that gave to you. Like I have lifelong friends from hockey, lacrosse, Muay Thai, like some of the best people I've ever met. So, and you didn't know it at the time. Sometimes they're your opponent, sometimes they're on your team, and you just never know. So,
well, without telling tales at a school, are your girls have either the skills or the heart to keep going, whether take it to post-secondary school, scholarships, whatever?
They do. There's some interest. So the game, they're box lacrosse players more than anything. So box lacrosse isn't really played at school.
Okay.
So they both have played field lacrosse. My middle daughter, Shay, who's 22, is now a nurse, a licensed practical nurse working. She had some opportunities school-wise, but she just didn't like the game. The female lacrosse game it's like the difference is between ice hockey and field hockey. So it's very different. So she didn't enjoy the game, and she said, I can't see myself going to school for 4 years playing this game.
Okay.
But I'm going to keep playing box lacrosse, junior box lacrosse, so she does.
Amazing.
And there's a lot of great athletes coming out of Calgary. Fantastic female athletes. There's great opportunities for female athletes in the U.S. And there's a lot of parts of it that have to fit to whether it's the getting to the right school that offers a program you want to take. Things that I tell parents to consider is where is that school? A lot of times they're kind of east coast of the U.S. It could be, it could be 3 trains and a boat and a goat cart to get there. So, because if you want to go see your kids, you better think about that. And also, there's some cost. There's no really a full ride for it, so there's some cost. It's U.S. bucks, and consider the fact of the age group that they're going to school is they may find their significant other down there, so they may not come back. Yeah. So if they end up in North Carolina, there's no direct flights to North Carolina. So think about where you're going. And then so my youngest daughter too, so she probably fit better to the field lacrosse game. She does like field lacrosse. But again, some of those considerations. I mean, she's a high skill player, I would say, and would fit into that. But yeah, haven't really. She's only 19, so she could still go that route. But then you have to weigh the impact of the expense of school, and again, learning how to think versus what to think. So you never know. A lot of the programs where they have sports, female sport, or the lacrosse program specifically, may or may not offer the programs that you want. So you have to be pretty choosy. But we've never really looked too far down that path right now. She's doing other things in her life, kind of finding her way. So yeah.
It's so funny when I've known you such a short period of time, but even when I was watching the podcast that you did with Jeff, I can see we all love sports, Robin.
Yeah, in whatever way.
It's a very personal thing that's very impacted. It's a huge impact on your life. At some point, will it not be part of your life?
Oh, geez, I can't imagine. I fear for that sometimes. So my wife is very patient with me and understanding. So she can tell how this, and I was an athlete when she met me. I continue to be an athlete of varying degree, right? I was always I'm a competitive person, and she knew that. So I play my hockey, and I was always pretty good at juggling. I take being a dad and a husband more serious than anything. So I'm a hands-on girl dad, and proud of it. So I always kind of manage my schedule. In the energy industry, you have the ability to play hockey at lunch from time to time, things like that. So I would, I rarely ever did the late night kind of hockey things because I had responsibilities at home that I wanted to be part of. And so I still don't play the really late night ones, and I'm a goalie, so I can be choosy. There's always demand for me, which is great.
So I have some other friends in their 40s and 50s that still play, and even they're talking about like 11 and midnight ice times.
Oh,
I'm like, come on, guys. And they said, well, it's tough. So instead of having, 2 beers in the locker room after you have one, and then you go home, I'm like, oh, you guys are better guys than I am.
Yeah, well, I'm lucky. There's a few good leagues that have and now my kids are older, so I don't always need to rush home because they're not home. And my wife has interest, and she's busy as well. So, I try and play. I have times where I'll play 3 to 5 times a week, but a lot of them are daytime, and there's a few early morning ones, like a 7 a.m., which is not that early. And sometimes they have a hard time finding guys to play. The young guys don't want to play the early ones, where I'm a little bit older goalie. I don't mind playing the early ones, so it's a good start to my day once I get my creaky body moving.
Well, there's a guy at work, Mike Hollab, and I met him, so he's probably in his mid-50s or something like that, and same thing. I think he's a goalie, and as long as you're a goalie, there's no shortage of people phoning in leagues, whether it's beer leagues, after lots of corporate.
Tons and tons.
He's always saying no.
Yeah, and I'm lucky. Yeah, and I did play a reasonably high level of hockey. So even like I participated as the rent-a-goalie guy. So I've known him since he started his company. So I still do rent-a-goalie every once in a while. Sometimes it helps fund my my goalie equipment and things like that. It's an expensive sport. But I've known him for a long time, and because of so he ranks the goalies based on their sort of backgrounds. So I'm lucky enough that even at 53 years old, I still rank in A class. I can play anywhere, anytime, I guess. But a lot of times it's not a matter of, I don't guarantee I'm going to stop any pucks, but I guarantee I'll show up. And sometimes with goalies, that's good enough. So nobody likes not having a goalie. But you originally had asked, do I see a time in my life without sport? And I'm fearful for that. So I'm hoping my body keeps hanging on. I've stopped kickboxing. It's a high impact game. I obviously don't compete anymore doing that. I had my last fight at 38, and people ask me, "Do you miss that?" And I missed that like you wouldn't believe.
Interesting.
I would do that, and if I could get clearance at home, and my wife's like, you gotta stop, you're getting too old for that. But I was like, if somebody said, hey, I got to fight for you in 4 weeks, I'd take it in a heartbeat.
Really?
I would do it. Like, I love the training, I love the intensity, I love the focus, I love all of it. And I never looked at it as, it's not a violent kind of thing. It's physical chess. Physical and mental chess. It's outsmarting the other guy. So
maybe I've never got used to getting punched, so maybe I'm just
yeah, that's true. I guess I got a thick head and a thick skull, so I'm lucky that way. I don't know. I'm from the generation where they didn't really track your concussions. I know I've had a few, but I do think that people's not genetics, but sort of sometimes your physical makeup can make a difference. I got a short, thick neck. Maybe that helps. I'm not sure.
One thing I wanted to ask you about, because Marie and I have 3 kids, and our kids are, I know they're all the same age, they're just a hair behind your kids. And so we've had our eldest kid move out, I think a couple of years ago. And not long after he moved out to live with Grandma and Grandpa, 15 minutes away, by the way. And Marie phoned me one day. She goes, yeah, I don't like this. And I'm like, well, I don't like it either. Yeah. And you could feel that kid gone. And I think you've had one of your kids leave as
My oldest has been gone for a while. So she's been in BC for quite some, I know it's got to be 5 or 6 years at least now. So she went out there for the last 2 years of her degree. She went to the very prestigious Emily Carr Art University out there. So she took a gap year, spent some time out there, and then landed out there. And she's been out there ever since. So, she's 26, be 27 here soon. My middle one, Shay, is 22, moved out 17, 18. Super independent, just, on her own agenda. I always say, hey, watch out, she's going to be somebody's boss someday. That equated to lots of, her and I very similar personality types, which can be conflictual at times, but hey, we've grown to respect our differences and our similarities. So she was out for a little bit. Unfortunately, it landed during the COVID time and going to school, so it didn't really, expense-wise and such, didn't really make a lot of sense. So she's back at home now, right now, and finding her way in her nursing career, like about a year into it. And then my youngest one is technically living at home, but has spent, roughly 5 months away out of the last 7 months or 5 or 6 months on a modeling contract. Spent 2 months in Guadalajara, Mexico.
Is that Lizzie?
Lizzie, yeah.
Okay.
So that's the one I just posted about looking for a job. So she's spent 2 months in Guadalajara, Mexico modeling, came home for the Christmas time, and right now she's 2 months into a 3-month contract in New Delhi, India, hanging out with 26 million of her closest friends.
How cool is that?
There's cool and there's struggles. It's challenging, but it's character building. Like she's a tough, resilient kid, and all 3 of my girls are tough and resilient. So it's I'm pretty proud. And then a lot of times you think, especially like I come from brothers. I have 2 younger brothers, so I think I turned out to be a pretty good girl dad. I figured it out. My dad, who in the business, he was a rough old oil field cowboy. He's from High River. He grew up in Blackie, and he used to say to me, "How do you deal with all the crying? There's always something to cry about." And it's different, right? He said, "Can't they just go downstairs and wrestle? Like we used to." You got brothers, right? So, it's been an adjustment, but I think I've made the adjustment. And girls are more complicated. I think lots of emotions involved, but I'm proud of them all. They're all, all those times when they pushed back on us, my wife and I, and sometimes they're a lot harder on mom than they are on dad. Mm-hmm. I think it's building strong women, and I'm a big believer in, I think that there's women offer a different type of leadership in industry. Some of the best people working for us at Finley Inspection Services are women. I think there's a great fit for everybody. But yeah, I'm proud of the direction they're all going. So
awesome.
Yeah,
I know Marie, and we have a bunch of friends involved with the Calgary Women in Energy, and I'm like such a huge advocate of that group, because that is an element that's statistically is not really represented very well in our industry. So every time we have the chance to support that group, and Marie said, not just for networking, but for women, supporting women in our industry, we're big advocates. And we have a daughter now, our youngest kid, for a long time talking about welder. And at first I was like, and then I'm like, well, I'm a pipeline, I could probably help you. And I'm like, okay, well, yeah, I actually think that would be awesome.
Well, and the trades are going to be hurting, right, too? Mm-hmm. So, chances are she'll be probably a hell of a welder, I bet, and very employable. And you got good connections, too, so that's always helpful. But, the energy industry in itself, I think we're kind of in the age bracket, too, where sort of, you've got your old guard, and a lot of them are kind of set in their ways and the way they manage and the way they do things. And we all know people in the industry who've been promoted over the years based on their years of experience and versus their merit, whether or not, just because I worked in the drilling world for a while, so just because you're a good roughneck doesn't mean you should be the driller, and just because you're a good driller doesn't mean you should be the rig manager. Whereas I think now you're starting to find a little more of that in the industry, where they're trying to get people that are they haven't just put the time in. Putting time in is important, and that can certainly take you to the top sometimes, but it can't all the time. So I think it's important that there's the different way that women may lead or participate. I talked with Jeff Humphreys when I was there. He asked me about being introverted. So, I sit and do these things, and everyone goes, "There's no way you're introverted." I'm like, "Yes, I am." Like, you would not believe, every personality test I've ever taken just screams it. And the science and math kind of side of me, and I was deadly shy growing up, and I learned how to do this, and I love this one-on-one. This is how I like to connect, right? So a lot of women are going to listen. I have a daughter who's super extroverted, but at the same time they listen. They see things a different way, and I think you need a mix of that in the industry. So I think it's a good thing.
Like, one thing that you've talked about lots after sports, one thing you talked about is training and leadership, and that's one thing I want to ask you about. Sports, how did that leadership experience as a younger person translate into your business life, and clearly you're as a dad?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's times in my life where I took leadership roles in sports, and I never really thought of it. It was just kind of natural to me. And again, my dad was pretty quiet and sort of a lead by example kind of guy, and that was very much my style of leading too. Is well, I'm going to make sure. I talked about my hockey career, so I played hockey as a walk-on tryout at the University of Calgary when I was 17. I had other, maybe if I had a little different guidance, maybe that hockey career would have went different directions. You never know, but. So when you're the third string bench warmer kind of guy, and you want to get your spot into that playing spot, which I never really did, which was fine. I didn't deserve to. I wasn't the most skilled athlete by any stretch. So I learned that I'm going to be the first one on the ice and be the last one on the ice, and I'm going to compete on every single puck. And that builds a lot of character, and I think guys like to practice with me at that time in the competitive. Now they don't love it so much. You try too hard, but it's different than a goalie trying hard is different than a player, hacking and whacking in the corner trying hard. Nobody's losing their eye or getting whacked in the face. It's just me trying to stop the puck. But that was kind of the way, that was my path, I guess. It was trying to work hard all the time and be consistent. And that's, I don't always get consistent results, but you can always put in the consistent effort. So that's kind of how I did it, and that's how I led through sport. I became a little more of a leader probably in my lacrosse life. Took leadership roles there in that same way, kind of lead through example. I'm not the rah-rah, cheer the team on guy, but when I speak, people listen. I think that's something that I think came from my dad. Like, if you yap all the time, eventually they turn you out, or they tune you out, right? So I even, like right now, I coach, I'm the director of coaching for Fury Lacrosse, which is the all-female lacrosse association. So it's girls like 7 to 17. We have 20 teams, and so I have 20 head coaches underneath me, and another, I guess, probably almost 50 or 60 assistant coaches underneath me. And I talk to them about how to coach, not just them, but athletes, and about listening. And, sometimes I said, I've had a few questions from some pretty high-end coaches about coaching female athletes specifically. I said, listen, use the sandwich method. Tell them something positive. Don't say don't or don't do this. Say try it this way, and then give them something encouraging on the end. And I said, it's okay to bark at the kids every once in a while. Like, you can't do it all the time. So I always make the joke with my daughters. It's like, it's okay to throw the garbage can every once in a while. And I do it very rarely. There's pretty rare occasions when it's happened. But when I do, it's got a pretty profound effect because I don't do it all the time. And it's not meant to be intimidating or anything like that. And everybody kind of understands that. But
I know you've talked a lot about leadership training. Have you done some, I don't want to say coach training as well, or is it just experience?
Yeah, I haven't done any coach training. I've done a little bit, I guess, just through osmosis, some of it. And a lot of it, I've done sales leadership training, and a lot of the I believe whether it's sports, sales, business management, a lot of it is the same. And my sort of philosophy is it, and why I tie it in, I'm doing my one little film session now, I call it Game Changers, and about the connection between sports and business. And I think that the things that work for me in sport work for me in business as well. So I called them, I had a recent, a sales position at one of the big corporate companies in town. Not a sales position, a management position, where I had a team that I didn't choose the team. I got the team, and they were kind of, they were a little bit let loose in terms of they weren't getting a lot of structure from their management group. So I started with them. Instead of, you can't just jump in and say, I want this, and you can't be controlling, right? I believe in empowering people. I think that's a big part of leadership, empowering them and then holding them accountable for what you've empowered them to do. So I started with this group with just 15-minute meetings. Coaching, I call them coaching sessions, not meetings. So my calendar is up to date. It is your job, your responsibility to go into my calendar, find a 15-minute window, and book it with me. So these was a sales group. So I was like, you need to come to me with, what did you do last week? Keep it simple, right? What did you do last week? What are you going to do this week? What can I help you with? So it took a couple sessions to get guys kind of into that routine. And then the goal with that eventually is maybe use a CRM, like we're tracking their customer information in higher detail, things like that. But this was the basis point, and it earns trust in the fact that I want to listen to what you're doing, and then you provide positive feedback. Sometimes it's critical feedback, but you can provide it in a positive way. And then when they know that you're actually there to help, I'm not here to slow you down. I'm here to help you make a huge commission. I'm here to help you, feed your family. These are the things, make it a personal connection outside of. Everyone's doing a job, but everyone does their job for a reason. Whether it's to buy your new Ferrari or to feed your family or whatever's important to you, right? Some people, the job is important, and that could be it too. So,
do you find bringing up the sales guys behind you, and I don't know, I assume you have some assistant coaches that you're trying to bring up behind you as well?
Always,
is it the same kind of skill set and training?
It is, in terms of bringing the coaches along. Yeah, it's very similar. It's very similar, and it's a lot of how you speak, how you communicate. I think is the biggest thing. How do people hear your message? Ultimately, I'm only responsible for what comes out of my mouth. How does everybody else hear it? So there are techniques that you can use to get them to hear it a right way. And even again, going back to sports, I'll have players that, my middle daughter, Shay, I've coached the provincial team a few times. I'm coming into my fourth time coaching the provincial lacrosse team. Cool. And the first year I did it, I was new to it, and so I was kind of assessing. This was quite a long time ago. I was kind of assessing players. So I'm like, I want to find out who's coachable, who can learn. So I would send out a practice plan, which could be like a meeting agenda. You'd apply it to business, and I sent out a pretty complex drill with lots of squiggly lines and really messy, right? And the part of it was to see who could figure it out, and that didn't mean that you had to be able to figure it out. It just meant how much were you going to get rattled by the fact that you either didn't know, or how are you going to ask questions. It was a bit of a test, right? And it was meant to be that way. And I after we came to practice, I'm like, okay, we're going to do drill number 1A, and then I see terror in some people's eyes because they couldn't follow the squiggly lines. And then I see, and I have, so my one daughter is very good at that. She could pick it up, and now she's become a nurse, right? So she could pick that up. So there's other ways of teaching it. So that's, okay, there's the ones who want to see it drawn. There's the one, and we always walk through it and you talk about it. So I try to make sure that I hit all those, knowing that everybody learns differently, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the kind of bottom line of it. So I do that in business and in sport. Like I think it's a skill to be able to explain things in a simple way. So I used to run the managed pressure drilling division of a big corporation here, which is a complex drilling process. So I used to tell people, if I can't explain that to my, at the time, probably 12-year-old daughter, obviously they're not going to understand all the technology of it, but just sort of the basics of it, then you don't really understand it if you can't explain it in a simple way.
Interesting. Like, it's funny you use the word coachable, because where sports is part of your life, it is not mine at all. Like, I grew up as a pipeline kid, so we're gypsies and stuff, so I never really got involved with sports, but I use that word coachable all the time with young people, because I'm always interested in if you're coachable, teachable, you have a good attitude and willing to learn. Well, that matters more than skill set.
Yeah. Well, that's the famous one you see all over the place. Hire for attitude, coach for skills. Mm-hmm. Somebody who comes in with all this, you see it in sport too. And you see it in business. Somebody who comes in and is like, oh, I'm the top sales guy. I crushed out $1 billion in sales last week. And like, okay, well, we're selling it. We got a new product to sell today. Oh, the guy goes off the rails because he can't learn about the new product or a new technique, or the market changes too. So I had a meeting today with a colleague who's a high-level supply chain procurement person. So again, back to business. Probably when we started in the industry, it was kind of lots of transactional type deals. It's, going for drinks, going for lunch, going to the Saddle Dome, things like that. And that works still sometimes. But what's happened in the energy industry, not just the energy industry, but all industries, is the buyers have become sophisticated. So those are supply chain procurement people. So they have goals and things that they're trying to get out of you in their contracts, which you may or may not understand why. And I believe that there's not a lot of sophisticated sellers anymore. So, or right now, not anymore, but currently. So sales people need to step up their game. And the best thing they could do is probably take a supply chain course to understand, because there's 4 quadrants in supply chain, and they're trying to drive you down into the lowest cost, the lowest risk, all these things. So you can find out how do I keep out of that low box where where you're selling on price, like the race to the bottom. We've seen it. You've seen it, right?
Oh my gosh, I talk about it all the time. So I'm a project person, so we're less interested in price, more interested in service.
Yes.
That is our key driver, but our challenge is a lot of decisions, either from the initial procurement hoops that have to jump through, or at the corporate stage, and we find them very commercially driven. And it's hard to explain. It's like, but once you get to the field, it's a different game.
You start to get it.
Price isn't the most important.
Well, you get what you pay for, right? So.
Oh my gosh, for sure. But how do you explain that to someone?
It's hard, especially with a supply chain person. It can be extra hard, right? So then that's why even like some of my social media that I've done recently online, I hired a great company to help me sort of tell the story about our company. Like we've been in business for 53 years. You can't, you and your family are well established in this. You can't build reputation overnight. That takes time. So we put that time in. So the first thing was, because my dad was kind of late in his career and wasn't really looking to grow the business, there wasn't a lot of presence. So people didn't know who we were. So we were this sort of hidden little secret. One of our big contracts was for a top 5, integrated oil company in the world. And we're this little tiny company without a website, right? So part of it was just sort of telling who we are. And then the second stage of that was a little more sales oriented and sort of, okay, why are we different? Now, we may not be completely different than anyone else, but we have things that we think are different, which is the integrity aspect of our business. And my dad used to always say, we hire on a higher level. We like to think we do anyway. And our reputation reveals that. We charge a little more. Our guys get paid a little better, but we don't have the screw ups. We don't have, you're putting $1 billion assets in the ground. Let's make sure you get the full life out of those things.
For sure.
But, no cutting corners, right? So, and
I have to ask, so I know your dad passed away, I guess it'd be 5-6 years.
Coming up on 6 years in June,
And so your dad is Finley. You are Finley, so you walk into it with all, you have credibility right away. Your last name is Finley, you're good to go. Who is there another Finley behind you, or what does that
It's
look
me
like?
right now. I mean, my dad was Larry Finley. Larry and Teresa were my mom and dad. And my mom was very engaged in the company. They worked, they were married for 50 years, worked together. So yeah, dad passed, I guess, roughly 6 years ago. So they didn't get quite to the 50 years of business together, but the company's now has surpassed that. You know, I'm 53. The company is 53 as of last month. Dad started a few months after I was born. So that's a good story. And then, yeah, I'd always had an interest in the company. Like after, you know, I talked about my political science degree early on, like right after that. That was sort of my first little dip into political science. You don't go to the newspaper at the time and look through there and find jobs in the political science world, right? So I was like, what am I going to do next? So the path was, I thought about business. I'd always had an interest in law, a few different things. I'm a pretty academic guy. I'm good at school. So I thought about started going down the business path, like an MBA, but I didn't have the experience. I'm a classic guy, C's get degrees, even though I always had great grades all the way through. University wasn't as great. So I got my degree and I was looking at going to business school. So I went and I managed a restaurant, which was actually another great, everything is a path, right? Like life's a journey, not a destination. So I ended up managing an Earl's restaurant in Edmonton. I moved to Edmonton. I got to manage a staff. Maybe this is why I became a good girl dad. I mean, typically in an Earl's restaurant, there's a lot of female staff, so I learned how to manage that, young female staff, I suppose. So that was a good experience. You know, became knowledgeable about costs and expenses and hiring and all these different things. I did that for a fairly short period of time because it's not a lucrative business, but at the same time, you learn some sales there too. So that's one of the places, you know, it's still a place that I frequent as a customer. But and I had a really positive Earl's experience lately with a guy who just, they do have a good training program. And if you buy into it, there's value in it. So I think my first sales course was working at Earl's. But after that, I kind of needed to go out and make a little money. So that's when I jumped into the field for a little bit. So I did a short time, maybe a year and a little bit in the field on a pipeline, just doing labor stuff. You know, I'm a big, strong guy. I'm not that smart, but I can lift heavy things, right? So, and an athlete too. So I was pretty good that way. And then I got a dip into that. So I went out and worked in the field. And my dad said, you know what, if you want to go back to school, and he was not a big fan of the political science path, and my mom and dad, they didn't go to university back in those days, right? So anyway, I went back to school and I did a year at SAIT and a year at NAIT, and I did a chemical engineering technology diploma, which, you know, chemical engineering is process, so it's pipelines. I learned how to design gas plants. I couldn't engineer my way out of a wet paper bag right now, but back in those days I could. So I went back and did that route, and then go figure, I took the subject matter that was probably more interesting to me, and I did really well. I had an honors diploma, so it was pretty good that way. So that was my little dip into the field. And, you know, I've seen some stuff in the field, certainly nothing compared to what, you know, you and your family has. I'm I'd say pretty green when it comes to the knowledge of the field, but I know enough to be dangerous. I do know some of the technical side of things. You know, I used to be able to calculate the laminar flow in a pipeline and all that kind of stuff. But I got some exposure to leadership in the field too. So I had times where I got, hey, big dumb guy, get in the ditch there and do that and that. And I'm like, whoa, that ditch isn't safe. Like, it's a freaking, coffin basically. I'm like, make that ditch safe. And then some guy gets in your face, right? Well, I'm a 23, 24-year-old, 6'2", 240-pound guy who knows how to throw knuckles. And I'm going to stand up for myself, right? So that never came to that. But you know how the guys will bark at you, right? So just sometimes you just gotta stand up to the bully from time. I'm like, you make it safe, I'm in there and I'll bust my ass, but I'm not getting buried in there, buddy. So I did that, and I got a lot of respect. I'm like, oh, university kid here, what are you doing? And blah blah blah. Anyway, I earned my stripes, I guess.
It's funny. So I went to U of C, and so as our kids are coming up and we're seeing what they want to do, because we're not telling them do this, do it. We'd like them to do some post-secondary, whatever that looks like.
Sure.
And our eldest son, he started talking about SAIT. I found this really cool program, geomatics, engineering. We learned how to fly drones. And I'm like losing my mind. I'm like, awesome. So
cool.
I watched him go through SAIT for 2 years. What an amazing school. Now I wish I had that opportunity.
Yeah, and you know what? I think it's like, I wish I had, if I hadn't gone straight to engineering, I wish I had gone maybe SAIT, and then I know lots of guys, whether they're drilling guys or, process design guys, that did a couple years here and then went down to the States for 2 years and came back with their degree. And I think that practical learning is very beneficial. So like at SAIT, the difference, like I have a brother-in-law who's an engineer. I know lots of engineers, obviously, but so the difference is, at university engineering, they grind the hell out of you the first few years. It's like it's a attrition. Like, can you survive, right? And then but they're learning theories, and it's kind of not the fun stuff. Like it's like, when you get to Sate or Nate, they're like, listen, we know the guy who figured out the formula to calculate laminar flow. Trust me, it works. Just use this.
Go, yeah.
And go. And I spent a ton of time like doing real calculations and doing stuff that actually applied, so it's applicable. And then even like my daughter, so she's got a licensed practical nurse diploma, it's difficult to get into school now, like really difficult, right? So she's talking about med school and all kinds of things. So you find your path however you go. But again, same thing. In nursing, you learn a lot of the theory part of it. LPN, they skip the theory. They just say, hey, trust me, it works. This is how you do it, and off you go. And it was a great fit for her. So I think there's a lot of benefit. Like States, there's some really clever, interesting things when it comes to technology and energy, and it could be clean energy. It could be, you name it. There's lots of
but just even the number of amazing programs. So I did a degree in environment. That's what I was going to do, and I finished it. So I graduated probably 20, 25 years ago, and the money wasn't there at all. So I went back pipelining. Yeah. But I'm looking at these kids now, like Summit, and he's like, talking about good money out of school. And that company I'm working with now, they made a 5-year relationship with SATE just to focus on those kids, because as soon as they done their 2-year program, 3-year program, 4-year, whatever it is, those kids are ready to go to work.
They can go to work.
Yeah.
And that's, one of our big clients for a long, I don't mind saying their name, was Chevron. We worked for a long time with Chevron. My dad had a contract with them and a fantastic relationship with them. And Chevron is, again, a top 5 big company in the world. And they're known for like hiring the bright lights out of, some of the top schools like Texas A&M and like the big schools, right? They get these great engineering students, and they have the sort of the theoretical knowledge, very academic, but they're sort of missing the practical. And that was one of the things that back in the day, my dad's company, now Finley Inspection Services, my company, I guess, offered was that sort of transition for those young engineers to learn about the practical side of things. Any of that could even be working with a local engineering company where you've got somebody who's pretty book smart, and they're, you guys, help scouting pipelines. I'm like, okay, great. Somebody draws it on paper from here to here. Well, that looks great. Well, you forgot about the mountain and the river and the pipeline crossing. So it's adding that level. So that was a big, early on, that was a big value add for our company, is that we had these guys that had the experience, that were okay to work with the young engineers and bring them along. So I think a lot of great people come out of SATE, and you see SATE and NATE and technical schools, and you see them progress quite quickly too, based on sort of just they're starting from a different, I want to say higher, but it's a different ground. The university education is certainly higher education, but it's you're missing some of the practical side.
For sure. Like I said, I don't regret it. I learned how to probably read and write a bit better.
Right, me too.
Beyond that, I'm not sure. Like we went to, we needed, after we finished school, we just want to go work overseas. So this is, the internet was kind of getting going in the late 90s, early 2000s, and Marie and I were applying all to wherever, construction, whatever, and she got offered an interview to go teach in Japan.
Ah, interesting.
And she's like, well, I got a husband. How does this work?
He had a degree?
And does he have a degree? Yeah. Bring him to the interview.
Yeah.
So they hired us as a couple. We went to Japan for almost a couple of years.
Good for you.
And I bring that up only because I think that was on your radar.
It was. I chickened out, so I'm proud of you guys. It's good for you because, I played hockey, so I had a couple paths. I was like coming to the end of this political science degree going, okay, what now? I need a job and things like that. And then one of the options, so I started, I had some room in my calendar near the end of my program, so I started taking some German courses. Thinking, well, I'm going to learn a little bit of German, and my thought was maybe I'll go play a little bit of pro hockey in Germany. It could be, who knows what level I would have got to. So I started some conversations there, so I knew enough to sprechen Sie Deutsch. And then what happens is you're only allowed so many imports from Canada. Of course, they always want, at that time, and still want Canadian players. You're only allowed so many imports. Well, guess what? They want guys who score goals, not guys who stop goals. They couldn't give a crap about any good goalies. So anyway, that kind of fell. So that fizzled out. At the same time, I also decided, well, I'm going to take a little bit of Japanese. So I took some Japanese, thinking, well, here's a good plan. Let's go to Japan and teach English for a while. And I got hired. I remember it was Henry's English School in Kyoto, and I chickened out. I just didn't do it. I was young, and I don't know. I mean, you would have been young too, so good for you. And I even look at my daughter now, who's living in India for 3 months. I didn't do it. So
if not for Maria, I definitely would have done it, because I wanted to go to work and get on with my life, and we did that and came back to Canada for a bit and worked. And then she's like, well, I want to go traveling around the world. And I think I was about 26 times. I was like, babe, I gotta go to work. I gotta start getting our shit together here. And she's like, what are you gonna do? And so literally went traveling for 6 months,
Good for
came
you.
back broke, but I'm so thankful.
Well, and I'm like, I didn't do that, and I wish I kind of did, and that's why I have my one daughter who's younger, and I'm like, she's really not sure where she wants to go school-wise. Who knows? She might be the one who gets involved in the company and carries this on for another generation. Because we're a people business, I mean, I understand the technical side, but we're a people business, and she's a people person, so we never know. It might be a fit. But that's why I said to her, I said, hey, she's got this little modeling gig, and I was like, hey, go do that, and you can see some countries. It's pretty cool opportunity, really. So you got your whole life to be grown up, and sometimes working is overrated.
It's funny you say family companies. Like, how do you, because you guys aren't small, I wouldn't say at this point, but how do you keep that family company feel beyond the name, obviously?
Yeah, it's hard. It's gotten hard. It didn't when I joined. Like when we started, my dad used to run, I don't know, 20 or 30 guys, probably would have been a busy year. And again, you've been in the business a long time. Margins and things like that have changed a lot. People were very willing to pay for this type of service that we provide, professional, supervision services, accountable, experienced, all those things. And clients would trust you to make those decisions. Like I remember my dad saying, so-and-so just called and they need a welding inspector for Monday. And I never, for the longest time, I didn't understand what my dad's business was. He was very vague on explaining it. But then, so they would trust us just to send the right guy. Like they want to see a resume eventually because they have to have it on file. But this was your job. Your job was to send the right guy. And that was how he built his reputation, is he always sent the right guy. Like over that time that he ran the company, I think there was three times they had he ran it for 48 years, I guess. 3 times he had guys laid off in 48 years. The guys got fired, got run off, which is crazy.
Oh, it's almost unbelievable.
Crazy. And he was, I don't know, I mean, he had this ability to read people's personalities, and I mean, I like to think I have it too. My brother or my daughters would say, "Oh, yeah, you're judgy." I'm like, well, listen, as somebody who's sort of introverted, a lot of the time, you learn more by listening. So I would listen and observe people's behavior and how they move and how you learn. And I talked about this with Jeff too. So I don't ever form my opinion based on nothing. It's based on something that you may not know I'm observing. And my dad had that too. And a good story with my dad was sometimes he would meet somebody and, I'd say, Dad, how'd that meeting go? He goes, well, you know what? And he's a country kid, right? Well, I looked into his eyes, and if he was a horse, I wouldn't buy him. Dad, what does that mean? Because he had crazy eyes. I couldn't trust him. If he was a horse, I wouldn't buy him. I was like, okay. Anyway, so that sort of old country style kind of worked for a lot of years for him, and that was the reputation that we had for sending those type of people. So the family side of it, so that was that. And now the business has changed in the world where the margins are skinnier and they say, well, send us resumes. I mean, you can make a resume look great. And, we still try and make sure to get the right guys there all the time, but it doesn't always happen. So that was the value that we offered. And, I do like to think that that's going to come back again, where people are going to say, and it is coming back already. Like I'm getting, I had a call today from somebody who I kind of loosely know and said, listen, I follow your stuff, and I've been talking to the guys that are in the field. Some of them work for you. Some of them know the guys, have your guys reported to them in the field. And these are some of the the hard guys to impress. Not just grumpy old oil field guys, but guys that have high morals, high standards for quality of work. And he goes, they're always impressed by your people. He said, so if that guy thinks you're awesome, I think you're awesome too. So that was the call I had today.
That's powerful.
Yeah, it was very powerful.
Everyone talks about how small this energy community is, and there's millions of us, but it's a really tight-knit community.
Yeah.
So those reputations, if I didn't know you, Robin, I could probably get a beat on you in probably 2-3 phone calls.
Absolutely,
max.
Absolutely.
So those reputations, they do chase you around for sure.
But then maintaining the family sort of side of it. So, when I kind of came over and took over running the company, it was just after my dad had passed and one of our big contracts had blown up. It was something we had never had that big before, 3 times the size we'd ever been, right? So I kind of jumped in, and I was, I was drinking from a fire hose. It was a lot to learn, and very much a mom and pop kind of operation, although focused on quality. Maybe business processes weren't there, but we treated people. My dad was an inspector too, so he's like, you got to get paid. The guy's got to get paid every 2 weeks, no matter what. Doesn't matter if they pay you or not. The client pays you. You pay them every 2 weeks. We got to get guys for proper rest for home, and they have families. And he goes, they get paid. We want them to be paid well. They're away from their families. I mean, you've lived that life. It's hard, right? So they have to be compensated for that. So that's why he always pushed the envelope on getting what guys are getting paid and things like that. So I just kind of took what I had learned over the years of what I'd heard him say indirectly and kept doing that. Now, at some point, you can't run the same rates you used to run. That gets, you have to be competitive in the market. And I still always try and push it. I mean, I've had several vendors tell me, well, you're the most expensive. And they probably tell that to everybody. But at the same time, we also provide the best guys too. So you get what you pay for. Like we said that before.
Like something I had a conversation with my mom, like not a week ago, because I talked to Marie about it just after. I said, yeah, my middle child, he's coming out with us for the summer. He's going pipelining, he's done high school. And she said, when I always thought I didn't want you boys to be pipeliners. And so I bring that up only because now you have kids potentially coming into, whether it's the industry or the family business or whatever. Do you have the same apprehensions, or do you want them to come in?
Well, I mean, I think my oldest daughter is an artist. I don't think she would fit, and I don't think she wants to fit. So that's fine. Totally respect what she does. I have an admiration for what she does. She lives in the moment. Life is in the moment, and her and I see things different ways, but we respect each other that way. And then my daughter, who's a nurse, she had talked about being a doctor early on, and maybe she will be that someday. We'll see. But she's where she meant to be. She's just got that, gets things done and great under pressure, and she's really good at it. And then my youngest daughter is, again, like I said, kind of finding her way. She's doing the travel. She's young. She may be the one who fits in. We never know. And we've had that conversation. We've had initial conversations, but you also need to, I'm not going to force her to go. If we blow up business wise and she has an interest, might find a place for her to fit. I mean, right now, like you said, we're this small big company. We're like Calgary. We're a small big city, so we're not insignificant in the size of the work that we do and the people we work for. But we run a pretty tight crew. We run lean and mean, and you talked about how do you maintain that family sort of connection. I mean, my mom was working in the company after, 6 months after my dad passed, and we had the busiest month of the year. My mom was like in the office every day, and it was good for her at the time. Dealing with mourning and along her husband for a long time, and so she's since retired since then. But I tried to maintain that. I was a salesman for a long time, I manager for a long time, and nothing drives me crazy than people who aren't accountable and don't respond to you. So now, it's getting hard now, but I still try and do it. I try to return every phone call and every email. So if guys, I won't return every call that comes through. Like if you don't leave me a message, I may not, I will try sometimes, but leave me a message and I'll get back to you. It may take a little while, and that was part of when my mom was still in the company. I used to say to guys, listen, I may not answer the phone right away, but somebody with the last name Finley will call you back. Cool. And it was my mom or me at the time, right? So now she's out, so the heat's on me for keeping that standard. But so far so good.
For what I do, so I'm a pipeline guy. We talk a lot about mental health. It's the new. It's coming more. It's more of a common topic in the companies and the industries. I see it on LinkedIn, social media, blah 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 blah. It still needs to bubble to the surface. Are you seeing the same stuff on your side of the business?
Oh yeah, I mean, and luckily through some of my, working at other places. So my dad, he started this company, I was probably 25, and he'd worked at Husky Oil before, so he had a little bit of oil experience, but then he got, in his life working at his own company. So sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And it wasn't ever a corporate environment. Not that you have to be in a corporate environment, but in our business, the guys go to work in the field and they report to our clients. So it's not a lot of managing the people, right? Now, luckily for me, in my career, I've had the opportunity to manage people. It's sometimes one of the things that I miss a little bit about my other jobs. And I try to fill that in other ways, whether it's coaching or, I'm looking at business coaching, things like that, like helping people and mentoring them. But it's the soft skills, I think, that I developed, and we call them soft skills or human skills. Getting to know people. It's one of the things I like to do. I ask people about their families, and you get to find out what matters to them. And some guys don't want to talk about it. It might not be their family, that maybe they don't have a family anymore. Maybe it's about, or they never did. Maybe it's their motorcycle that means the most to them. You never know. But I do see it in the industry. You hear about, I try to ask. It's more prevalent in even the companies that we work for, making sure you have like a mental health or mental support program. We're trying to check in. Like we had a tragic death in our company. One of the guys working for us, a young guy, and I never did hear the full result of it, whether it was substance or anything, but it brought things really to attention with other guys who were on the crew working with him. And maybe it's because I have daughters, I'm pretty in touch with my emotions as much as I can still be. My daughters joke that Dad, you only have, don't hurt Dad's feeling because he only has one, right? He doesn't have feelings; he's just got one. Yeah. But I like to think it's a good one. So I try to I try to talk to people. You have to talk, and you're right. It's such a stereotype in big tough men in the energy industry, right?
But talking comes more naturally. Does like I don't even know you. It's funny, but you seem like such a softie.
Totally. I am. But don't forget, I can spin kick you too, right? That's the funny thing too is when I worked in the corporate world, I liked wearing suits, and I still like wearing suits. I just can't fit in any of them. And I worked downtown, and when some guy, ruffled oil field guy, I was when I was wearing a nice suit with a pink shirt. Tough guy salmon is what they call that color. And some guy made some kind of sideways comment, but I have daughters and stuff. And I say, yeah, you're right. I am a sensitive guy. But if you want to go back in the back alley and talk about it, we can do that too. Because I happen to be wearing my Chuck Norris action suit today, and I could kick over your head. Anyway, so yeah, he quite quickly. Sometimes I have my little brother is like 6'6", like 290. He's a big dude and tough guy, and used to work as a doorman way back before he got his company going. And I was like, well, why? Like, how would that guy ever get into dust up? Because he's a big dude. Like, he might be tough and he might not, but why would you want to find out?
Oh, that's a gamble.
Some guy, it's a gamble, right? So I don't know. I feel like maybe it's because I can back it up a little bit, and sometimes. I think sometimes that, I talked about the, controlling your emotions, and the kickboxer who smiles back at you when you hit him. I think sometimes that, I don't mean that to be intimidating by anybody, but I think that sometimes has an effect on how people take me. And, I have daughters, so, they've had over the years, they bring boyfriends and stuff home, and sometimes the boyfriends are nervous. And I always say, well, the only ones who are nervous are the ones who should be. Right. So there's lots of nice guys who come in the door and they shake your hand, and they, like the old days, you had to go to the door one day and meet the old man with your knees shaking and, all that stuff. So I'm like, they got to do the same thing too. They got to earn their stripes. So.
Well, we grew up at a time when you phoned someone on a cord phone, you didn't know who was going to pick up.
Exactly.
One thing I wanted to ask you about, because it's funny, you brought up a Simon Sinek course, and I've actually been looking at them myself. So, but you said you actually took one. Which one did you take?
So it wasn't a Simon Sinek course.
Okay.
It was called, but it was based on his background.
Okay.
So, you asked me earlier about coaching training. So I've had, this is one thing I kind of wrestle with. Like, I want to get into coaching, more into business coaching. I've done it a little bit, something that I really enjoy, whether it's a younger guy who's just learning how to manage a team, taking on more responsibility. Again, some of these coaching tactics, it could be anything. It could be a senior level guy, but I think there's probably this sort of certain stage of career person where I fit the best. But anyway, I started getting involved with a bit of a little coaching program, and I signed up and at the time it was during COVID, so it was a online, what do you call it, an online summit. So it was like a full day of various courses and such online. And one little component of it was an organization called the Y Institute. So the Y Institute is based on the Simon Sinek sort of concept of your why. So one of them was a little survey, and it was a quick little survey. And it came out, I think it had 9 different things that were 9 different whys. And there were things like, make things better, contribute. I can't remember all of them. But anyway, I did mine, and mine came out and it said contribute. And I was like, what the heck does that mean? So when you click on it, and I share it with people, like there's a paid version of it, and then there's sort of you can kind of quickly, if you do the sort of cheap version of the survey, the free version of the survey, you can kind of probably narrow it down to 2 or 3, and then there's a link with videos and language around things, and you go, oh, that's me. So I was like, contribute, what does that mean? But at the same time, as I'm kind of going through my career, COVID and stuff, thinking, the company is struggling, I got to get my resume going again, where do I fit? You're at that age, the midlife, I wasn't, not getting a Ferrari kind of midlife crisis, but what am I going to do career-wise? I was like, what do I really like this coaching, whether it's business or kids or athletes or whatever. Why is it that I like that? And then suddenly I came out upon this contribute. And a lot of it was about not that you don't need pats on your own back. I never really was that type of person, but I like helping other people be successful. Like that's what, if this podcast gets 10 million freaking views and I helped you and it benefits, the Support Pipelines brand, which I think is super important for our industry and for the people involved in it, then that'll make me feel amazing, right? That's what I want. That's why I want to be here and things like that. So I did that little survey, and that's kind of pointed me that direction. And I had my family do it, and it's interesting. Like I've had my family do personality tests, at varying ages of their life too. And it's interesting to see. Like I said, I have an artist daughter who's a very different way of thinking than me, and I was like, this is you. Like this is so bang on. Like some of these things are amazing how they come out. So it's So I often refer, because there's lots of guys in our age bracket that are like, okay, well, what do I do now? I've kind of made a career this long, or they've been phased out ageism,
For sure.
Some of that kind of stuff happens in the careers.
I would say it happens now at our age when we get in our 50s.
100%. It used to be later, but now it's earlier. It's getting earlier, right? Especially if you're, if you're in some of the young guy sports, the sales and marketing, like those guys. Like I remember, I got 50-year-old sales guy's job at one point in my life, and I was like, yeah, they fired him instead of me. And I was like, because I'm the young guy, I'm the guy in the low guy in the totem pole. I should be the one out the door, but they got rid of him instead of me, and now I'm in that age bracket, right?
Oh yeah.
But this finding your why, and it's like your purpose, and it's not always clear. Like I know you had Nick Gemmell on, and Nick spends a lot of time. He's a very introspective person. He spends a lot of time thinking about that, and good for him.
He's a thoughtful guy.
Very, and you have to think about that on a consistent basis, So. Yeah, it was a neat little program, and it was part of this sort of coaching workshop that I did, and you probably need to do some more of it because it's always continuous improvement. So,
well, I mean, I'm looking at the Simon Sinek ones, but I'm also like an avid podcast, audibles, reader, and I never started doing this stuff before. And I'm like, well, maybe I'm a middle-aged guy, and I'm still trying to grow and develop myself, and I never had this passion 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, but now I developed it all of a sudden. Now
when you get to a stage when it becomes important.
Oh, it's super important. I'm excited about it.
Because sometimes you're too long. You're just grinding in your job. You're just providing for the family, and you're working. You're driving your business, and you're driving it for money. But the money is what provides some of your lifestyle, like the things you like to do, whether it's going to the lake or riding your motorbike or having a boat or whatever those things are. And then you kind of start thinking about it, as you sort of sneak up in older ages. And I think it's important to think that way. And like I'm not going to retire. I don't think I ever could retire. I have too much energy to sit around.
Yeah.
I have lots of interests, things like that'll keep me busy, but these are some of the things that float my boat is doing this kind of interaction, this contribute.
Well, I talked to Big Dave, so my dad would be 76, and he stopped for about 6 months. I think it was in 2006.
6 whole months,
whatever. And he said, you can go. You don't want to cruise, renovate your house, or buy a truck or whatever. Yeah. And then after that, but the whole time he said, people have been phoning, hey, can you help us build this estimate, this plan, all this kind of stuff, and. No, I'm going to try this out. And after about 6 months, and it was a great conversation because he said, well, they're not phoning to do me a favor. They need help.
They need you.
And these are the same people that helped me when I needed help.
Yeah.
He said, oh, man, like maybe I should. He had a good expression. He said, I'd like to give back to an industry that gets given so much to me.
Yeah.
And Matt, that really resonated with me, and I think about it all the time. So now I'm looking for young people to support, help, mentor, whatever I can do, because I've got so much help coming up as well.
When I had it, I talked about it in sports. Coaching is giving back to the game that gave to you, and I do that. I like to do that in the industry too. So I mean, for a long time, I was kind of in the. After I went away from sort of technical engineering type work, I kind of found that even though I am a little introverted, I did enjoy the personal interaction, so I kind of end up in technical sales and then management and things like that. So a lot of times I'll have young guys, 25 to 30, and they're doing, everyone knows you can make a good living in the energy industry. And if you're, technically engineering or sales is the highest paying career in the world, but the only one you can't get a degree in, right? You can take all kinds of courses, so you can be a great salesperson and make a lot of money and enjoy it. So I'll meet young guys that are maybe they've been selling Coors Light at the bars or who knows what. But I'm always like willing. Someone reaches out to me, I'm always willing to have a coffee. Like, what's the cost of a coffee in an hour of my life to go talk to some of these guys and tell them some of the things that I didn't know along the way. Like a lot of it, for sure, I know you had to figure things out. If your dad's in the same wheelhouse as my dad was, and there's definitely some you got to figure this shit out on your own kind of stuff, right? So
for sure,
and that's good. You need to do some of that. But sometimes it's that little guidance along the way, and maybe I had more guidance than I thought, and I just didn't listen. Like one of my famous sayings is, "The older I get, the smarter my dad gets," which just means I should have listened a little more. Right?
No, I like that.
Yeah.
Well, my favorite expressions is, when you look at mentoring, everyone always says, try to be that person that you could have used when you were breaking out. Right. And so I always try to be that person.
Yeah. And sometimes it's not sometimes, like I said, I didn't always listen to what my dad said. If I had listened probably a little more, path would have been different. But the path is what it is. You end up where you are. So I feel like my daughters listen to me, but maybe they don't. But if I can mentor somebody else, again, they have to figure things out for themselves to a certain degree. But sometimes it's somebody outside your family. It's it's your different network that wants to hear it in a different way. So and I also try to present it in a different way too. Sometimes, like you said about how people learn differently. I think that's an important for me. I like to give back in the industry as well. Like I think this is talked about my daughter coming into the industry. I don't have any concerns over my kids coming into the industry. Yes, it can be cyclical. My dad used to say, go from bologna sandwiches to steak sandwiches, and we never knew as a family. We had 3 boys playing, expensive hockey. Dad had times that were great, and they had times where they didn't turn the wheel for a year. But we still played hockey. We still did those things, and that's because they were, they didn't borrow money. They didn't have a line of credit. They were old school, that kind of way. But I think, keep giving back to this. I don't have any concerns with anybody coming into this industry. Like, anybody who thinks the energy industry is going away is straight up delusional. Like, not to get political, but I mean, yeah, I'm all for renewable sources and things like that. But I mean, there's a lot of holes in that game, and energy, having access to cheap energy is what lifts people out of poverty. It's what gives people a better life. We're fortunate in Western world, North America, and Europe and things like that. That's how people have better lives. It's through energy, because you need it. And I talk about that in my personal life too. Like when I have a daughter or my wife or somebody gets kind of rattled about things, I'm like, listen, there's only so much. It's a science thing. There's only so much energy. Just energy moves from one place to the other. So choose wisely how you spend your energy, right? But energy is an important part of this world, and there's so many things that we rely on that I don't know too many people are willing to give it up.
Well,
and why should they?
I know, and I'm a firm advocate of the community and even Canadian energy, and people always ask about that because I'm just a pipeliner or whatever, and I said, well,
you're a little more than a pipeliner, my friend.
You can get your energy everywhere, and when I talk to especially young people who don't see it the same way I do, and I hate to say it's political, but it is, but that's the world we live in. I said, you know what, capital is very mobile, and if they don't build these projects in Canada, unfortunately, they do get their, whether it's gas or oil or other things, from another jurisdiction. You know what? Canada is not just safe. We've got labor laws, environmental laws. We have a really healthy social climate to build these projects, and they'll go somewhere else where it's not that way. So unfortunately, is that better? I don't think so.
People will fill the demand for energy one way or the other, so you can choose where you get it from. Is it Canada, where it's, some, I've seen a sign somewhere that says some people care more about where they get their coffee than where they get their oil or their energy products, right? So, I need ethically sourced coffee, that was, farmed organically. I'm like, and go to the fancy coffee shop and pay $10 for a cup of coffee that was ethically sourced. But, I don't know, guys in out east in Canada that get that oil that's chucked up here from, or, shipped up from Venezuela. I'm not confident that was ethically sourced all the time. So,
good.
And you look at too, also, like, if you look at the top producers in the country, in the world, U.S. is way up there now. They've cranked up their production. Canada's obviously way up there. But if you look at the rest of them, most of them are national oil companies. I mean, the Saudis, obviously, we're in a very sophisticated operation, but it's Saudi, it's Iran, it's Iraq, it's Kuwait, it's, and I mean, I've never lived in any of those countries, so I can't speak. I have a brother-in-law who lives in Saudi, so I know a little bit about that, but they're not following the same environmental rules that we're saying, that we talk about. I think I made a comment today online about, if we really want to, us hammering away on carbon tax is not really changing much, because the world is an open top fish tank. Everything flows. Like, the pollution at the border doesn't stop. If we really want to help people, it's getting off of the really nasty sources of fuel, and they may not be, whether it's burning wood or cow dung or coal, get them on LNG. And I went to a speech many years ago at Canadian Association of Oil Well Drilling Association. I can't remember the term it's called now, but it was Peter Tsurtsakian, who's the well-known sort of a speaker, really smart guy and super introspective and interesting, and Daniel Smith at the time was a Wild Rose Party member, and they were both great. And Tsurtsakian talked about the transition in energy, how developing countries, everybody they're relied on some of those nasty sources of energy that I just mentioned, but then as they progress, they then start to rely on crude oil, which again is a little more polluting, and then they go with natural gas, and sort of LNG is in there. So there's a transition. You can't go from freaking like burning coal to solar panels. Yeah, and that's debatable how much, there's a lot of holes in the solar panel game. There's a time and a place for them, but so you have to follow the progression. You can't go from, low-level athlete to NHL hockey player. Like, it's everything is the same in life. You have to put the time in. There's no shortcuts.
I remember we went to a talk downtown. A guest of mine, or a friend of mine, we were their guests. She worked for Canadian Oil Sands at the time, and they brought a table to listen to Alex Epstein. And he's an American kid. I think he studied philosophy at one of the schools on the East Coast and in the U.S. And he wrote a book called The Moral Case for Fossil Fuel, and I just burned through it, and I thought, he's not an industry guy. He just said from a philosophical
from
perspective,
an outsider look,
from totally outsider, and he's basically made a career at talking about this. So I ended up buying half
Sure.
a dozen copies, and I started giving them out to people.
Yeah. That's I mean, that's the thing is, when somebody from outside the industry says that, that's important, right? I mean, for us, we live in it. This is what feeds our families, and we see the value. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. I did a sales training course in Ontario, in Toronto. It was through executive training with Queen's University. I went out there, and it was a bunch of high-level sales executives, and I was one of them there. At the time, I had a senior sales position, management position, and I was the only guy from Alberta out there, right? So we're sitting and going, and there's guys from Quebec, mostly Quebec and Ontario. They're nice and close by there, and I was the only guy who flew out from Alberta. Nobody from BC. I don't think there's anybody Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and I was the only guy out there doing this course, and I learned some great sales techniques and things like that through that course. Course comes along, we get to lunchtime, and I'm like, again, like I am a little bit introverted, so I don't always reach out and want to chit chat with everybody. So I kind of go off and grab my lunch and sit in the corner. And all of a sudden, I was never the popular kid, but all of a sudden I'm the most popular kid ever. And the table is full. Everyone's like sitting on me, and they're not sitting down with me just to sit there and eat. They're sitting there firing questions at me. And they were actually really bright group that wanted to know about the energy industry. It's like, what about these guys that go on drilling rigs? Why do they get paid so much money? And how does this work? And you can explain a lot. I mean, drilling a well is still poking a hole in the ground. Obviously, there's piles of technology behind that, but you can explain it in a simple way, which, like I said, I think is one of my strengths. So I'd explain it in a simple way. And why do guys get paid so much? And why is this? And why is that? I'm like, well, they work 12-hour shifts, and they work hard, and they're away from their families, and there's in cold environments and challenging. I'm like, that's to you. Should you be compensated for that kind of challenge? Of course you should. So nobody disagreed with anything, but they wanted to know. And it was, and there's a part of our country that doesn't know where energy comes from. They don't know how we're fueling this country.
I love that you were approachable enough person to them to ask you those questions.
Well, I don't know.
And
I guess I was.
Well, I think you had the opportunity, so you might not have changed people's minds.
I spoke in class a little bit, so like I said, I'm a nerdy academic guy, so I sat up in front and I spoke. So I guess they thought I was approachable, which is good.
Well, I like the fact that even though you didn't change people's mind, maybe, I guarantee you they thought about that conversation after.
Yeah. And I know other people. So a good friend of mine, he's got a little podcast as well called Great Northern Discussions. His name's Kevin Tucker. I met him working at Ensign. He's moved through the energy industry, high-level hockey player. And so he started a little podcast as well. And he talks, and he's from out east. He went to school. I think he's from, Ontario. I think he went to Notre Dame school at one point in time playing hockey. Went way out east to Acadia, where I think he won a national championship playing hockey out there. But he's got this little podcast, and he's had some very interesting guests on. But a lot of what because he has like a network of people from back in his life, so when he puts these things out, people from back east might see this about what he's talking about, and getting to know the personalities behind this and the positivity and why we're here, this industry, right? So I think those kind of things are important too, and hopefully this kind of discussion goes that way too. Like, we're not just a bunch of rednecks out here. I mean, it's crazy.
I hope so. Like, I talk about mental health all the time. Is the same reason I talk about pipelines. I just want to open up a discussion, be approachable. If you have questions, ask. Again, I'm not.
100%.
It's not a religious thing. I'm not trying to change people's mind, but I definitely want to. Constructive dialogue's dead, in my opinion, and nobody wants to talk. They either want this side or that side, and I'm trying to get away from that, Robin.
Yeah, it's too divisive, right?
Yeah.
You need. There is middle ground. There's a reason why the country run pretty well when political parties were a little more central, right? There's a reason, I'm not sure if it's from the famous Chinese book, The Art of War, it's divide and conquer. And that's a lot of what's going on in this world. And it's unfortunate, and people need to get smart and push past it and listen to the other side. Really listen. Listen means you're not talking.
Dialogue, man.
Yeah. And trying to hear both sides of the story and then form an intelligent opinion. Don't go in just because you believe in one thing. And there's most cases, there's we meet in the middle, right? And that's where the answers are.
Like, one thing I want to ask you, I try to ask most people because I'm just curious, because it is such a polarizing subject, politics, pipeline, all this kind of stuff, energy. Like, do you see any positivity moving forward? Like, when you look out beyond this, like, where's the positive?
Well, I try to believe there is. So, like, I'm in a little bit of a lull business-wise right now. It's a little quiet. the industry is that way. Some of it I think is government related. Some of it is political. When I say political in terms of what's the environment of what people think about our industry. So I'm trying to remain optimistic. Lately, in the last 2 weeks, I've seen a lot of talk online. Maybe it's just in the circles that I run about proposals for projects and getting our energy product, whether it's to other markets in the world or markets within our country. This is what's going to. I remember I think there was a line going to like central interior BC that got not approved. I think it was a Fortis line. It was not approved, and it's kind of like there's tremendous growth in that Vernon and Kelowna area. Beautiful place to live, and people are going out there and like because that area has grown so much, they need affordable energy, and it's not electricity is not reliable. Whether it's affordable versus reliable too. Like so they did not approve this gas line to that area. Like there's nothing more safe or efficient than the delivery of gas. And it's cleaner. Don't kid yourself unless you live in maybe Quebec where you're creating your electricity with hydro, which we just don't have that option in the prairies at least. You're probably using a fossil fuel to create your electricity anyway. So don't be so naive.
There's still a gap. Like I know Kenny was in Whitehorse for like 12 years, and they were still using like heating oil through the houses. And we were at the cabin in Fairmont last weekend for our Easter long weekend, and there's still the big propane bombs 100%. Out back. Because there's no pipeline.
There's no pipeline there. So there's a balance between how much do you disturb the environment to get those lines there, but it's still the most efficient way. Even the Keystone pipeline, which has been shut down, and who knows if that will ever come to light again. But it was it was designed. They had. Whether it was compressor stations, they were designed with where solar panels make sense, highly efficient engines, things like that. Like there are ways to improve, this industry is the ones who are going to come up with the innovation. They're the ones with the motive and the know-how. We're the ones who keep when we thought they used to, I remember when they used to drill dry wells. There's no dry wells anymore. Maybe that happens from time to time, but the technology is crazy, and the more they squeeze out of these wells, whether it's the 10,000 meter horizontal that they're going right through, like the technology is amazing, and we have found those products through technology, and it's the energy industry that has innovated it, and in a lot of cases the Canadian energy industry. It's not just the Americans that are innovating it, and they're going to be the ones who innovate in terms of finding the countries shouldn't cripple the energy industry, because that's who's going to come up with these clean solutions. It's not it's not some other business. These are the ones who are motivated to do it, and they have the know-how and to commercialize it and all those things. So
well, I got a couple of religions. One's free speech, and the other's the free market.
Agreed.
So I think the solutions will find themselves.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. So I do feel optimistic about. I think it's going to take some time, and I sometimes I can be a worrying type person. So I'm trying to control the things I can control. So in my downtime, business wise, right now, I've had a lot of incredible conversations over the last few weeks about different ways where our company can get involved. But I'm also having. I'm using the time to optimize how our business runs, perhaps to be more efficient. I like to think that this little lull in our industry is the calm before the storm, because I do feel like, common sense will prevail at some point. We live in a cold country that's big and vast. Canada is uninhabitable without fossil fuels at this time, and it may always be that way. So you can't heat your home all the time consistently with electricity or other sources. We can't get across, we can't get, getting hammered on fuel tax or on carbon tax to drive. You've been to Calgary, you've been to Alberta, like all these places, like you can't get around any other way. There's no electric train running between here and Toronto. Let's be realistic. Like this is the way if we're going to have to live, and some of these things are basics of living. I'm not talking about driving to the mall or things like or flying your private jet somewhere. I'm talking about the basics of whether it's getting your kids to school, getting groceries, all those things. We need those things. Like you're kidding yourself if you think you can live without them. And I challenge anybody to start live. Maybe there's guys out there riding their bikes, carrying their groceries in their with Toto in the basket. I don't know. Maybe that exists, but maybe not that much.
Maybe one day.
Maybe.
Well, I don't want to keep you, but man, Robin, I just want to thank you so much. Like I said, I still am feeling getting to know you, but it's so easy to talk to, and I know we kind of roll around the same community, so we probably know a bunch of the same people. I'm sure. Yeah,
well, we'll do this again, whether it's here or somewhere else. Whether it's off the cuff, but this was really great. I super appreciate the opportunity. Like I said, You know, you said you felt like you knew me. I felt like I knew you and your family. I had met one of your brothers. We had a video call a little while ago, and your family and what you've done with you know, the support pipelines and your pipestone business. These are, you know, I think that the reason we align is because I think we have a lot of the same integrity and the same kind of values, and I think that's important. And there's a lot of people in this energy industry that have these type of values, right? So people need to embrace and know that. And yeah, I'm always grateful for the opportunity to talk and meet people. And yeah,
well, thank you for sharing your voice today. I appreciate it.
You as well. I'm grateful for the time and looking forward to next time.
Till next time.
Awesome.
Thanks.